The webwork of life is vast and all-inclusive. When you touch that web at any of its strands, the touch is felt in all other parts of the web. So is it with life, with this physical existence, and with the many lives and the many worlds beyond this particular plane. The story of humankind is an ancient one, far more ancient than is generally supposed. Humanity, as you know, the human being in the physical sense, did not originate upon Earth. There is no missing link between ape and man, because man is not descended from the ape. The life that was brought to Earth by those who settled this planet, who are your forebears, now populates the Earth. There was upon this planet an indigenous life form, but it was not related to the mammalian form that of which the human being is a part. The story began long, long before this planet was settled. The solar system has always borne life, this solar system. But the universe teems with life. And the form of that life that you recognize as the human being is a very frequently found form. It is ancient in the universe. This area of space was a Johnny-come-lately. As time goes, you have been limited in your imaginations and in your thinking, by and large, by the evolving understanding of the human being as Earthman. There was a great backward plunge, due to reasons that we'll be exploring. And in crawling back up the ladder to the rightful use of free will, and finally now to the wholeness again. This is not the first wholeness for the human being. It is the first wholeness for the human being on Earth. All of existence is spiritual in its nature. This wing of reality is one among many, and many is far too limiting a term to use. Always is the evolution of understanding and of wisdom. Always is the progression toward godhood. That which you understand as godhood, and finally far beyond that, to the essence of God itself. The universe is God. The universe is an extension of God. The universe, as we say, is a webwork. And it is God that is at the center of that web, but not God as you imagine God to be. You imagine God, now we're not speaking of each of you as individuals, but you as human beings, largely still imagine God as gods were imagined 5,000 years ago, as extensions of humanity. Better, bigger, stronger, more powerful, more mysterious, but not infinite. And infinity is what you are living as well as living in. This exposure of experience to you is less than the twinkling of an eye. And yet that does not make it unimportant. It is simply that when dealing with the eternal, with the infinite, a concept which is staggering to the human imagination, conditioned as the human being is, because of the nature of the experience of life on Earth, conditioned to thinking of beginnings and endings in a very brief lifespan of consciousness on this plane. You cannot visualize that which has no beginning, no middle, and no end. It is the illusion of time that is confusing you in your present form. But let me say that even involved with the time, the temporal function, we are dealing with unimaginably vast stretches of that time. There is in this physical universe civilization piled upon civilization. There are many deeds to be done, many lessons to be learned, many of them utterly foreign to your imagination in this particular aspect of your being. Earth, in this time, in its existence, in this time of graduation for humanity, once more into its wholeness, there are many observers of this planet and its inhabitants, both from the wider reality and from the spatial reality. The drama that is taking place here is new in its complexity and in its details, but it is old in terms of the vast panoply of life experience. All races, all levels of development go through these paroxysms of rising and falling, finally rising, finally understanding, so that they need no longer continue the cycle of birth to death that they have been doing as a race of beings. So what you do in your life, first in terms of being born in the physical sense, living your life, reaching the peak of your activities, slowly declining and finally dying, is repeated throughout your history and your histories. What is seen in your individual life is seen in Earth civilizations. What is seen in Earth civilizations is seen in the story of humanity on Earth. And what is seen in that story is seen in the eternal cycle that takes place. Now, it is not a merry-go-round, because you do reach that point, finally, of understanding where you do not destroy yourself. Now, how this race has destroyed itself again and again has been through imbalance, where the wholeness has been weighted in one direction, where ego, pride, is the downfall. In the compulsory forgetfulness of all of the lives upon the physical plane, this race again and again has forgotten and failed to remember the central purpose of its being. So has it been, and has it been, and has it been, and has it been. Now you are arrived at another testing time. Another time of graduation. It isn't decided that this time you will not fail. Yes, for this process of transition. That is decided. Yes, that is decided. What chaos reigns during the time of transition is a different matter. But that the new age is being born, the triune human being is being created, is beyond question. And the millennia that lie in front of this race in this time span will finally determine the release from the physical reality. As this dawn appears, when you have gotten through the agonies of the death and birth process that's going on now, then the mission of humanity opens before you to unite as a race, as a people, to create upon and with the cooperation of this earth a single living being, where all humans are in truth one, where there is universal love, universal cooperation, where there is a universality and unity of purpose, and where the earth is not mined and raped, but made love to and harvested. The energy of the earth and the energy of the human being become one as the energy of the Christ joins the human being. And that trinity of energy completes the process. But it does not make you angels. It does not make you above the struggle. It is but a beginning of another chapter in the eternal development of the Spirit. So we have said that this has been repeated and repeated. And what of Atlantis? You are Atlanteans. Each of you are Atlanteans in a greater sense than the sense in which all human beings are Atlanteans by heritage. And that is because at this time of your own personal spirit's graduation ceremonies, those lifetimes that were specifically Atlantean, specifically a part of the time in which the experiment of that period flowered and decayed and destroyed itself, becomes opened to you. That lifetime comes into prominence. Now, we have said many times, all of the lives are simultaneous. They are ordered in your experience by a number of factors. We have spoken of the cluster of lives around specific fear issues. Then beyond that, there is the calling into awareness of specific lives because of the timing of your own growth, of your own development. That is why you are Atlanteans today. Each of you has a consciousness, perhaps not available immediately to your ego self, but very powerful, very much involved with your destiny, with your attitudes, with your likes and your dislikes, with the friendships that you form, with the alliances that you create one with the other. Very much interrelated in this life as your earth life is interrelated with the lives of others. The web coincides. This consciousness that is a part of you, that is accessible to you, becomes a part of you more fully as you go through this process. You are uniting, in a sense, with that other self. Now, of course, you lived as many lives as Atlanteans over the millennia as you have as denizens of Earth. But the life that is chosen out of those, the Atlantean life that is chosen by you to accompany, harmonize, and enhance this one, is specifically chosen because it interlocks with this life, so that there are common issues, there are matters that coincide all the way through. We have said that Atlantis did not originate upon Earth. The Atlantis of legend, of Earth legend, is of much more recent vintage. It is a part of the time of darkness, in which only the glimmer, only the half-memories, only the ancestral memories of the true Atlantis remained. The abilities, the skills, the talents that had been a part of Atlantis and the Atlanteans at the time of the dispersal had atrophied, had given way to the stark necessity of survival upon what was at that time a hostile environment. The Atlanteans' abilities sufficed to create for themselves a home on this planet, but could not be sustained. Could not be from a spiritual sense, but also could not be from a practical sense. And there was a relatively lengthy descent into darkness. And so the ancient, by Earth terms, city-state of Atlantis, that did in fact sink beneath the sea, was but an inheritor of the original. And there were among those Atlanteans so-called magical powers and abilities that became legend in the ancient world. It was from that Atlantis that what remained, most of the secrets remained, but the ability to understand them and to manipulate nature in the way that Atlantean science required was lost, was simply not accessible. The tools were not there. Only the theoretical knowledge, and humankind was surrendering its surrendering its ego to overt control by what became to be thought of as the gods. And that is spirit guides that began leading humankind through its long childhood. So you are looking back over your shoulder in the ancient world to the last vestige of full consciousness, full possession of the will. And you are looking back from a time when your own consciousness was indeed under not day-to-day movement-to-movement control, but under the overt influence and interference of spirits guiding you, ordering you about, directing you, making it possible for you to rise from the savagery that had become the human part, so that you would not destroy yourself in your infancy, and hold you by the hand, leading you up to the time when it's all right, now you can try out your free will, and now you can try out your mind, and now you can make your decisions for yourself. Still no equality of the spirit, but a gradual through the adolescence then, and now into the maturity. And so those ancient memories, even of the earthly Atlantis, were inaccurate and partial. But the secrets that remained with that Atlantis then were put into the guardianship of castes of priesthoods and so forth, of protectors of the faith, so to speak. And primarily, not by any means exclusively, but primarily in what became Egypt, and of which more at another time. So, reaching back to the time of Atlantis before the Atlanteans found rescue upon Earth, the Atlantis is, at that time, is what you now know as Venus. Almost, at that time, a sister planet to Earth. Not greatly dissimilar in environment. Upon that planet had been created over a period of several thousand years, a civilization of great brilliance, great attributes, and a single deep flaw. Now, the Atlanteans on Venus had gone through their own process of evolution, as again it was the descent and then the arising into understanding and so forth. And they'd gone through that and were beyond the level that you find yourselves in now, into a balance, but still with free choice. You see, even with balance, that doesn't signal the quote millennium. That doesn't signal that you are at last free of all issues. No, it strengthens you. It gives you such power that the impact of your decisions is far greater. That the magnitude of your choices reverberate with much more power. And that was the level at which the Atlanteans were before the fall of their civilization. And the flaw that brought about the destruction was the flaw of pride. They had forgotten the spiritual purpose that allowed them to graduate into wholeness. So now at this time, and now into the next, probably the next 200-300 years, there's going to be great consciousness of spirit, because the rebirth is so new. But gradually the memory of the race fades as to that time before the balancing of the spirit, as to what did cause those great imbalances. What was the higher purpose of the graduation into wholeness? And it becomes pretty much forgotten, you see, on the conscious level. And so then choices are made as to the use of that power. Each step along the way, along your evolutionary growth, you are given more power to play with. And what you do with it determines what happens to you. Well, so it was on Atlantis. The ability, now naturally with wholeness ends the desire to conquer and to put other beings into chains and that sort of thing. It is the issues are far beyond that sort of gross animalistic behavior. The issues become refined, and to a point where in some ways it's not possible for me to make clear to you the kinds of moral choices that were the Atlanteans, because it's simply too far ahead, you see. But we will say this, that they had focused on creating a civilization that was self-sustaining, that was non-mechanistic. They did not have machines and moving parts and sputtering engines and so forth motivating their civilization, although that had been a part of their own past development. Rather, there was the use of crystals, crystalline power harnessed and balanced against each other in particular conformations, in which they reacted to each other to create predictable results. These were activated by thought, that's inaccurate, activated by a focusing of personal energy on the part of Atlanteans individuals who chose particular kinds of development that made them experts in certain kinds of work. In healing work, in construction work, in artistry of various kinds, a full series of choices. But with powers well beyond that which you have now, but are the logical extension of those powers that are growing and awakening in you now. The abilities, the powers of the spirit. When you become whole, you see, you have the full use of yourself, which you've never had in Earth memory. And when you have the full use of yourself, your power increases. It's not even comparable to what you had when you were incomplete. And so you begin to be able to use, you see, all is energy. You draw that, you are going to become able to, and the Atlanteans were able to draw that energy, that multifarious energies exuded from the planets and from the stars and from each other and in the ether of the universe, to channel it, to weave it into specific patterns of energy that would allow certain effects to take place, to neutralize the effects of gravity, for example, to create matter out of energy. Matters that would be considered quite fantastic at this level, but are the direct is the product of the direct use of these psychic spiritual talents as they grow into maturity. So the civilization erected, as we say, was non-mechanistic, but sophisticated in the extreme. There was no step in Atlantean history of smashing the atom as has been the case in this time round. They had gone from the mechanistic civilization into the use of the spiritual powers, first very primitively, but with a gradual increase in power and understanding. However, atomic destruction was involved in this, but it was done through the use of what we'll call the mind. Done through the use of that energy. In creating life, or the attempt to create life. It was the attempt at a usurpation of a godlike power that was not theirs by right. It is what you are all in training for, to create life. It is what you are all practicing for. You are all gods in training. But this was an arrogance that seized power, not a humility that allowed power to be received and used, but grabbed for what was not offered. In this process, a chain reaction took place. A cycle of atomic destruction that could not be halted nor turned back. It was not instantaneous, but to loosely describe it, once it was begun, every atom connected to every other atom. This mind does not have a great deal of science in it, so we have to be very primitive. The atoms progressively became disorganized and disintegrated. The result was as though atomic warfare broke out upon Earth, finally, in that the planet was consumed in fire and destruction, a destruction that still continues, not in the white hot fury of its peak, but still continues, and the planet quickly became, as it is now, quite unlivable for human-like forms. Now, we've said that humanity is an ancient race throughout the universe. It doesn't mean it's identical. It adapts to the circumstances of each planet. And so but basically, what you would recognize as a human being, with minor biological differences, minor differences in appearance, but clearly human beings. And all of that type of life require a fairly similar kind of environment. And so as that environment, it was clearly seen as soon as the process began and it was discovered to be irreversible, that there was no time to lose in leaving. And indeed, for the vast majority of the population, it was not a heavily populated planet, although it had been in an earlier stage of development. At the time of the destruction, there were somewhere between 4 and 4.5 million individuals on the planet. And but it was quite impossible for all to leave. Now, while it was possible to do many things, it wasn't possible for the Atlantean to move from Venus to Earth simply through the power of the mind. They were stuck there, by and large, as you would be here. But transport was created. Now, we say that they created matter out of energy. And they created the reverse, too, creating energy out of matter, which human beings already know how to do. But creating matter out of energy was involved in the process of creating huge ships, of which a memory, a racial memory, is the Ark of Noah. It is an ancient, at the time of Noah, that theoretical time, it was ancient, an ancient tale then, retold. And so life forms, not simply the beings, the Atlanteans, but life forms were brought too, in order to begin a process of adapting Earth to accept, so it was livable. And they didn't all land in one spot, you see. There were focuses throughout Earth, but there were not huge numbers of people involved in this. And so it was a very slow process. Not all, matter of fact, many did not survive the first few years on Earth. The planet was, the environment was hostile. It was changed. The planet Earth, the living planet Earth, accepted this new life form and evolved a way of symbiosis with that life form. That wasn't instantaneous. And you will see geologically in the layers of the Earth, you can see evidences of, if you know what to look for, you can see evidences of what some writers have called terraforming, of recreating planetary characteristics, not in a gross way, in a gentle way, cooperating with the Earth in creating new foods and chains of chains of well, I'll give that up. At any rate, spending a good deal of time in adapting to the Earth and the Earth adapting to the new beings, and that was long before history, as you know it, began. And we're trying to isolate in on the time of that inhabitation in Earth terms. It would be, probably 20,000 years ago, somewhere in that area. But it was very cold when they arrived, and reversing a cycle of, well, it was an ice age called now an ice age. Really, the planet was more cold than warm in that time, and would have gotten colder and colder without the adjustments that were made, and the cycle continued of warmth and of cold within the planet, but not to the extremes that they had existed before. And so, at any rate, great deal was done by fully mature Atlanteans and fully chastened Atlanteans who came on Earth and decided, well, this planet we're going to cooperate with. You see, and so the beginnings of the dispersal of population around the Earth happened in that time, and happened quite rapidly in its original phase. Then, of course, there was the gradual loss of those abilities. Now, why? The why, to an extensive degree, has to do with what we have spoken of before, and that is the inter-exchange of energy of being with energy of place. You cannot be separated now from Earth. Your energy, that is your mother. It is your mother, an adopted mother, but then you changed, you see, so now it's your natural mother. You changed, it changed, and you became symbiotic. You cannot leave that any more than the Atlanteans could, although they had to leave the planet. They had to leave that energy, but they could not remain who they were without that energy exchange. The sharing with Earth, and before that the sharing with Venus, of energy, drawing from the planet, giving to the planet, sharing energy, planetary energy, was a part of the growth of the Atlanteans, the evolution of the Atlanteans, into the abilities that they had in cooperating with the planet and creating the wonders that were Atlantis. The crystalline technology could not exist on Earth. It did not exist and could not. And so there was a lengthy but yet fairly rapid descent into darkness. Finally, savagery. Then the growth upward again. Now the story continues. That cannot be reckoned a failure. There are no failures. It was an experience. It was a part of the cycles of life that lead inevitably to growth. There must be what you would perhaps call failures in order for the growth to complete itself, because you learn from those failed attempts. And you may not, looking at it historically, you may not think you learn, but you do. Racially, finally you learn from the process of making mistakes. Trial and error is the fundamental form of learning. And so what you learned in the destruction of your home is with you embryonically throughout the ages of humanity on Earth, and now by your connection with your Atlantean experiences, sparking into life. You will not make the same mistakes again. Other mistakes, yes. But you're not going to make the same mistakes as were made in your own past. Now, there we are, back to you as the individual again. Part of the web. And what takes place in your life takes place in all life. Part of the rhythm, the harmony, the oneness of the universe. And now you stand once more on the threshold of a dream of wholeness. Through your legends on Earth, through your fairy tales, mouth to ear, generation after generation, you have retained the memory of your former abilities to fly, to change matter into energy, to change energy into matter. The stories of the fairies, and of the elves, and of the wizards, and of all of the creatures of legend are ancient, ancestral, racial memories of what had been in your former days of glory. And the itch, you see, you needed that memory, give you the itch to get back there. Why Would a land-bound creature, such as a human being, seek so desperately to fly through the ages, making wings of wax to try to reach the sun? You remember what was, and you recreate it as best you can, and you create imitations of it. And if you cannot fly yourself, you create vehicles that will give you the illusion of flying. It will fly for you. But you will fly again. And you know that, and it's what keeps you going. At this time, this is just that glimmer of light before dawn breaks. Still, as it says, always darkest before the dawn. For some are lost in fear in the darkness, and others see the glimmer of light that signals the dawn that's coming. You are among those that sees the dawn coming. You are among those in which who feel the stirrings of the Atlantean abilities, the Atlantean wisdom. You are the inheritors of Atlantis, and you are the forebears of the civilization that will eclipse Atlantis. This nation, most specifically, is the heir of Atlantean thought. The Atlantean civilization was, in a sense, Aquarian. Now, the astrology of Earth is different than the astrology of Atlantis because the positionings are different. Nevertheless, in effect, the Aquarian image on Earth, those characteristics of the Aquarian were the characteristics, by and large, racially, of the Atlanteans. And as Earth enters that vibration, that time of energy, that with those characteristics, then all of this comes together, you see, not coincidentally, but all of the parts of the puzzle moving gradually into position so that they can be completed and a coherent picture emerging. In this time, you grow more conscious of your Atlantean background. It is for a purpose. It is to help awaken in you, as you grow into your maturity as a being, to awaken in you, to give you the subconscious skills necessary to begin the work of bringing your abilities to life and into play in your life. An internal guidance system, an internal instructional system that you tap to begin to learn to use these so subtle energies and talents that at first you fumble ham-handedly with them. And you try to heal yourself, and there's a flash, and you can feel, yes, it works. And then you can fumble and fumble to try to find that flash again. But that's how you learn, bit by bit, and you keep trying, trial and error. But now you have the other lives awakening in you, connecting with you, to bring you into your maturity. And many of you, in the story of your life, in this experience, this incarnation, are repeating patterns that were yours in your Atlantean life. Friendships, as we said, relationships. Not simply relationships with individuals that shared that time with you, but the kind of relationship. Some essential oneness in the nature of that life and this life. A sort of celestial twinship that transcends space and time. Now, what purpose does it serve for you to know this? Because if you are more conscious of it, you will help the process along. There's nothing really you have to do except know that it's there. Feel the confidence when you deal within, in meditation, whatever you turn your hand to. You know, it doesn't have to be anything arcane, it doesn't have to be healing, it doesn't have to be flying. For doing your job in your life, in a relationship, in a use of your work energy, in a use of your creative, artistic energy. It will enhance all of those. And you will gradually learn to use this power consciously. And what you do is expand to receive it. Feel yourself differently than you felt yourself before. Recognizing that you are the heir of Atlantis. Recognizing in your awareness, in your head, that you are connecting with an aspect of your own wisdom and your own maturity as a spirit that gives you access within this poor, frail body to unimaginable power. Now, if you accept that, you will be that. You create your reality. And as you add positive ingredients, the reality you create is more positive. You are unimaginably more powerful than you know yourselves to be. And not only in some long-range potential, in this lifetime. No, you're very unlikely to conquer gravity and fly in this lifetime. But you are able to become a self-sustaining being, to heal yourself, to regenerate yourself. Now, at this point of your development, if you lost a limb and tried to grow it back, it would take you a good deal of time, probably far longer than you have. But you have that power to regenerate cells, to create matter out of energy. And simply knowing that you have it, even if you don't understand it or how to tap it in your consciousness, allow it to flow in you, to become a part of you, to drift up from the inner being, to permeate you. And you will learn gradually, and very gradually it will become a part of your consciousness too. And then you will consciously manipulate that power. The lie of weakness has been what has held you back through all of these lifetimes. The belief in your own inadequacy. As that belief fades, and as you recognize, and you're doing it in your own lives, by facing what to you, and what to the person next door might say, well, anyone can do that, but what to you is an impossible hurdle that you hurdle. And the hurdle may seem like a long, slow, bloody crawl, but you do it with increasing bravery, with increasing faith, with increasing love. And your self-approval rating goes up, up, up. And the more it does, the stronger you get. And the stronger you get, the more you approve of yourself. And on and on and on until finally you attain your full dimension. But that's what this graduation that is going on now is about. Uniting with your Atlantean self, becoming whole, learning to use that which is your birthright, recreating the reality of this earth. So now we will pause and for some refreshments, and then return in a few minutes for questions.
Plautus, could you tell us about the space beings that seem to have a base near Thunder Bay, Ontario? They seem to fly in and out of the Lake Superior.
Well, understand, again, this relates to the Earth being a being with an electrical field and with energies that vary considerably over the face of the Earth. And there is, in the matter of this travel, it's not magnetic, but it's certain energy areas of the Earth are easier to get to. The travel, by and large, is not through space, but skipping space. And along lines of energy. that have their focus in particular spots on the earth. Do you follow that?
Yes.
The beings that, the actual physical beings, inhabitants of other planets, aliens, extraterrestrials, what have you, that are visiting Earth in this time, there's not a one that's, a monster from outer space. It's all, these are all helpers, and helping for various purposes. Some of them appearing only in the ether, some only in the consciousness and not in the flesh, projecting their images and projecting their energies rather than appearing in the flesh. And many of the visual contacts have not been material contacts, but a projection of another place. But there are nonetheless a number of actual physical contacts. The apparent impossibility of some of the reported maneuvers of what are called saucers is explained because these are not physically present. Yes, any humanoid would be crushed by the acceleration and the abrupt changes of direction, but not when it is a projection of the flesh, you see. And this is something that you're going to be learning to do also, and you do it first in your sleep. And you will then, your consciousness, so to speak, will leave your body, although there is always a connection, you never fully leave. There's always a cord to the body. And but you will leave your body at night and visit other places and see things. Now, some of you will remember this and some of you won't, but you're all doing it. You're all doing it now, because it is a part of this stage for you. You're learning gradually, and you're learning first to move the spirit in an unconscious state, because you're not consciously in command of your full being yet. But the practice, nevertheless, has a cumulative effect in wearing through to the point where your consciousness is ready to accept it and ready to carry on that way, in that kind of projection. And as in the first attempts at any new attempt at communication, at first your range isn't much, and you're liable to get pulled back suddenly as old fears interfere with new talents, and it'll be halting at first, but gradually, not in this incarnation, it'll be pretty primitive in this lifetime, but gradually as you move onward, you gain full control of that, and you become capable of doing exactly what those others are doing now. Now, and aside from an unconsciousness in sleep, some of you are able to do this generally unpredictably in a state of meditation, where you will abruptly and generally only momentarily find yourself viewing another scene, but with a clarity and a reality that is not the product of visualization, imagination, fantasy, or any other of those factors. And usually it comes and goes with such lightning speed that you're not even aware of it until it's gone. Then you think, wait a minute, what was that? Where was I? Well, that is travel. That is projection of the consciousness, and it projects through time as well as through space. So you may find yourself abruptly and briefly viewing a scene that would appear to be historical, or a scene of war, or a scene... Now, do not confuse these with prescient visions of the future. By and large, these are flashbacks and flash sideways into the reality. You are more limited in your ability to flash forward because of spiritual conditions, laws, in terms of your development. But nourish these opportunities when they come. If you chase them, they'll run away from you. But as you get into the deepest state of meditation of which you are capable, so that you are fully released from ego, and you are silent, then these matters can occur, and it's all exercise. And so these, the space visitors, their purposes are many. Part of the purpose is really the existence of them at all, and that is to open the sense of wonder, to open the readiness to accept what is coming. And we will say this: as in all matters, those for whom the truth, with a capital T, is not to be a part of this life experience, whose exploration is yet of the dark, must not get incontrovertible proof of that which is not for them to understand and to see. That is why, and we recognize it's often a frustration, that you cannot translate your own transcendent spiritual experiences to those for whom the language is meaningless. So the signs and portents and the signs on earth and the earth changes and the disasters and so forth must be seen to be a part of a pattern and to have higher significance only by those who are a part of the evolution. And so while these visitations will be more frequent and more meaningful rather than simple observations, they will yet not be accessible to the entire population.
How about the ones down in Peru that Shirley MacLaine wrote about?
Well, what we have said is it was really not directed specifically at the ones you mentioned, but rather at the nature of the phenomenon. And while they're all from different planets, different star systems, the purposes are sometimes to enlighten one or a small group of beings for the purpose of that individual's own karma, own needs, as well as for the impact that individual has on others, both positive and negative. You see, it's a sort of, on one level, a giant celestial chess game, or visualize the most complex game that you can imagine, in which there are all sorts of moves necessary to be made that this death and rebirth be completed, and be completed to the advantage of that which is being born. So there is what you would call manipulation, but we beg you not to be defensive about it. It is only what interference there is to enlighten and not to mislead, while the immediate effect is often misleading. And that is simply the fact, with a child. When a child is very young, while your goal is always to be honest with the child and forthcoming with your answers, you recognize that because of the limitation of the child's experience, that some matters must be put very simply and put in ways that would be misleading if you were saying it to someone of a different level of development. And it is so throughout the chain of being. It is all spirits are equal, but in their state of awakening in the material realm, there is a hierarchy of opening eyes, and so there is guidance on that level, and the saucer phenomenon, the extraterrestrial phenomenon, is a part of the mystery as well as part of the revelation. So some must, there must continue to be obscurity and around this issue.
Plautus, I heard a rumor that the substance azurite was in use back into the times of Atlantis. And I'm wondering if that's true, and if so, what was its use, and what are the properties, and is there a for this in this time?
Well, as we have said, the Atlantean technology was based on the use of crystalline and other mineral formations as specific translators and directors of energy, both as sources of energy themselves, but as receivers and transmitters of the human channeled energy. And the azurite that you speak of is of terrestrial origin, but it is closely akin to a similar construction on Venus, as there are other analogous formations, and indeed the crystal formations here on Earth, now that the energies have adapted and changed, are attuned to the Earth human usage. And as you develop, you will use these in your own scientific technology.
So what can it be used for now? Are you saying is to be able to?
This is thought transference, the azurite.
Okay.
It is, and we would say to you that, you can do this focusing without doing this, but sometimes by making gestures, you are able to bring in your mind a reality. It's one of the uses of symbolism. Bring it to the eye, to the spiritual eye. It is both a transmitter and a receiver. It takes your energy, magnifies it, and focuses it in terms of specific uses of that energy, and in this case, transference of thoughts. You can develop your muscle, so to speak, there, by working with a friend, and if both of you would have this substance, and then use it, and in fact, if I suppose it's not in tune with the culture here, but it would be good to wear it in that spot, not full time, but for a time, and during your meditation, perhaps would be good, because it is an opener.
Thanks.
Do we pick our stone from the astrological chart?
Well, that is a roughly accurate, but with gaps that have been filled in by substitutes over the centuries. We would rather say to you, alert your higher self that you're ready to find out the material that is either useful in a specific way for you or specifically attuned to your vibrations. And then be alert and expect it to appear, either in your meditation, you say, it's such and so, or to find one in a store or on the floor, But trust yourself, or you're your best source of information.
Sarah, you were saying that the Earth had to accept us when we came over and kind of changed with us.
Yes.
Seems like the Earth, as our parent, has still put up with has been very loving, and it's been a very loving act on its part to kind of adapt to all this and put up with a lot of, even if it is illusionary, it's still a lot of destruction.
Oh yes, and it's not illusionary on a very meaningful level. And to continue the analogy of mother and child, it is the Earth. Yes, the Earth has been patient, but the spoiled child has violated the rules too many times, and now the Earth takes action, punitive action. And yes, this these changes on the part of the Earth are a part of the cycle of growth for the Earth itself in attunement with humans. But there are many levels of meaning, all of which interrelate. And at one level of meaning, the Earth, as our mother, is going to give the spoiled human a good spanking.
Are we going to be able to finally grow up and give it?
Well, yes, of course. That's what's happening. You see, that is why in the Mary classes that we spend time uniting energy with the Earth energy in a conscious way, because you need to grow again in your attunement to that Earth energy. Once it was thoroughly a part of you in historical terms. And now it needs to be brought in again because you have become estranged from the parent. And now you grow into oneness with that parent, and that is a part of this path that you are following.
Plus, I had an experience. I was in a course in Astral Soul, and we were instructed, or we could do it if we wanted to go to let our consciousness release our consciousness and go to other planets. And we were allowed to pick which planet we wanted to go to. So I picked Venus, and I was really uncomfortable. I mean, I didn't see like forms or shapes. I could just feel the energy on the planet. And I wondered why I was so terribly uncomfortable. It was such a loving place.
Guilt.
Really?
Guilt. You know, the Christians speak of the sense of original sin, the fall from grace. That is a part of the racial memory. And that was the fall from grace, and that is the source of the sense of original sin, as the concept is understood.
And if I could go again and leave my guilt here.
Well, you see, putting it in human terms, in psychological terms, you killed your mother. And imagine that a planet that was your responsibility and from which you had sprung and with which you shared, you destroyed out of your willfulness, with no turning back, no way to undo what you've done. It left a deep scar in the collective psyche of the beings that have become you.
All of us.
Yes.
I never understood.
Is it important that we know what our purpose had been at that time, if it's paralleling our life now?
There will be a time next spring, late winter, early spring, when for the graduates of the Mary classes, we will be channeling that information for you.
Okay.
You said it was pride that brought down the Atlantis and merged it under the sea.
Well, you see, it really wasn't so dramatic as the legend has it, because the legend has confused the original and the story of the original Atlantis and mixed it in with the story of the Earth Atlantis, and it was a natural disaster, obviously, purpose in a natural disaster, but it was not the same sort. They did not have the technology to cause the destruction. It was a symbolic reminder of the destruction of the original.
Plautus, can you talk about relationships in Atlantis? I mean, are they
analogous? Certainly.
Yes.
Because the beings that you are now are not so far removed from the beings you were then. However, in the sense that you're both fundamentally human, and have fundamentally have sets of emotions that each would recognize in the other. You are of one flesh in the long view. But even though there have been modifications here on Earth, not so gross that you wouldn't see each other as brothers and sisters. And so the relationships there, again, the time that we're dealing with was a time further along in their evolution than you are in yours. But it is, the relationships there were not dissimilar, not identical, but not dissimilar with what is growing and shall grow out of this present culture. And that is to say that relationships were not necessarily two individuals, very seldom, in fact, two individuals. That was far too limiting. These were people who had developed themselves on a energy level in the broadest possible sense, so that there's great complexity there, and there would be, inaccurate term, matings between different individual beings for different purposes. Some would be 1-to-1, others would be 3s or 6s and even 9s, and they would be of varying purpose. And so what you would think of as a romantic love relationship existed. You see, it was not the same because it was higher. It was not dependency or mutual dependency. It was more realistic and not lost in the clouds, but it was from the heart love. But that was not limited again to one individual. Rather, that heart love was felt as it is now for various reasons from beings who've lived together before and have had other relationships and come together again for purpose. Well, so it was there, but there were not by that time so many barriers against the relationship assuming the importance that it had, using its energy using the energy of the mutuality until it was completed and then released. You see, so there was a flow and a flux of relationships that overlapped each other, and some went on through the lifetime, and others were relatively brief. And they all served a variety of purposes. So, it wasn't so simple. Imagine what dating was like in Atlantis. But we would say that the development that's coming now is not dissimilar to that, but it's going to take a long time to develop in that distinctive quality. You see, as completed beings, working with their own energy complexes, the Atlanteans knew each other more than on the surface, more than with insight, but knew the energy of each other, and so could make very subtle connections and have relationships for what would seem very obscure purposes, because they truly recognized how the two energies would fit together and what matters would be affected by it. And so what now you do in the darkness, stumbling with the guidance of your higher self and the resistance of the ego self, they were united. And so didn't need to have these things subconscious, but bring them up into the consciousness and act on them.
Plautus? This may seem sort of silly, but are all of the humans on the Earth descended of the Atlanteans? It seems like we've grown so amazingly in numbers. Where did these souls come from?
Oh, well, there's no limit to the number of souls. Understand, you are all one. Ultimately, you are all one. You are dealing with infinity and eternity and an unlimited supply of everything. And so the differentiation of spirits are projections, and you are capable of innumerable projections into time and space being this person and that person and the other person. You're doing all of this at once as a part of the whole. There's no way to really make this clear, but we try to do our best. In the matter of what was the question?
Well, where do they come from? Some of them seem newer than others.
Well, that's true. That's true in experiential terms. You, because you're dealing in a universe, a physical universe governed by time. Time is one of the main rules here. So there is a serial developmental evolutionary process in all Earth physical universe oriented matters. And therefore the spirit in appearance begins somewhere. And so you will see a great primitivism, and it can be in the midst of civilization, it can be in Africa. The most sophisticated and the most mature spirit can be living in a hut under primitive conditions, having transcended the need for all of those material appurtenances. And next door to that individual can be one with his first consciousness of human experience, and primitive all the way through, you see. And so is it in the city, and in the civilization, so-called, in which they're hand in hand. Now, there are more spirits at your level of development in the civilized city organizations than in the other, because of the needs that are involved. But there are many first timers here also, and you will see them not as the afflicted, not at all as the afflicted, because the most afflicted souls are often the oldest, among the oldest. Afflicted in terms of physical problems, mental problems, severe emotional problems, and so forth. But they are serving a simple role, understanding the nature of the game, being guided through a role of no great complexity. They are the fellow down the street. And seemingly, completely normal, quiet, uneventful life. And those of you that go through the storms of the kind of life that you've chosen may sometimes look with envy and sometimes look with wonder that anyone could survive a life so boring. And the fact is that the life isn't boring to them. It's all they can deal with, because they're just beginning and just starting and in that phase of evolution.
Do the younger souls share this same underwriting guilt of the destruction of Atlantis?
Well, of course. The sense of sin, you see. The sense of guilt is the sense of sin, is the sense that is the core of all of your fear issues. That was the trigger event for this phase, of course. Triggered again and again, as all major fear issues are. This is just much bigger. But triggered again and again by doing this or doing that or doing other, killing Christ, doing whatever nastiness has been done that you want to take responsibility for. But it flows back to that fall from grace, you see. You had achieved wholeness. You had achieved the state of grace. And you did not do with it what you could have. And so you destroyed yourself, and you fell, and yet you lived. And what a burden.
That's not likely to happen again.
It is possible, because you have free will. But, as we say, you won't make the same mistake you made before, you make other mistakes. But we would feel also that the strong likelihood is that this time humanity will retain the balance that it is achieving, and be able to move then beyond even this stage that is yet to come.
Had we achieved a Christ compassion as on
that
Venus?
Is
had we
on Venus.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're going to have to stretch the analogy a bit. Because this is, while it's a continuation, it's a different story. You're different beings than you were as much as you are the same. And so the pathway there and the vision there was not identical with this one. And so what we are dealing with as Christ consciousness, Christ energy in this story is not so analogous to the situation then, but then too, at the time that you received your wholeness in that evolution, it was because of the reception of a transcendent energy, the united body, mind, and spirit. Spirit's always the last to join. Goes from simple to complex to transcendent.
But it was not a Christ energy. It was a different kind of.
It was, well, we may fall and drown in semantic waters here, but you may recognize it as being the equivalent of the Christ energy, but not the same energy that you're receiving now, but it's equivalent in terms of the needs of that time and that evolution.
I'll buy it.
Does what we refer to now as karma, especially individually, not so much as a group or human karma, translate from Atlantis to here? I mean, is there any...
Is karma from Atlantis?
I mean, is there
only
any...
the basis for all the karma?
Okay, that's...
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So we had stepped beyond karma at that point of wholeness?
Yes, which is what you're doing now in ending the duality.
So they lost all their karma, and then they, when they fell from grace, they gradually got it more and more accumulated, and that's where we are now.
Yes.
We inhabited
the sins of the father visited upon the child. You see, the Bible's full of truths that you have to take out of context to find the truth.
Did we have a myth in Atlantis or somewhere along the line, a group myth that at some point in our development as a race, that when things split, that one half would move on and that the other halves diametrically would be destroyed? Was there ever do you know what I mean or what I'm getting at? Was there ever a myth to that effect?
We're not quite clear on the question. If you are speaking of the awareness of duality or the beginnings of the sense of separation from the wider identity, that has always been a part of intelligent life in the physical plane, the separation from full knowledge.
I think I'm talking about a destruction, an actual force of destruction on the planet, that later a rebirth would occur, but that there would be much destroyed.
Oh yes, that's recurrent. Yes, absolutely. That is, you see, the original story is repeated and repeated in terms that can stand as parables, that can stand as reminders of the essential truth. And so the flood, for example, was a very real event. And it did indeed destroy a great deal and much of humanity at that point. It didn't destroy everyone except Noah and his animals. That was the myth. But the fundamental story was true, and it was true for the purpose of reviving that ancient memory and reminding humanity of the nature of its goal. And so it is with the fairy tales and with the folk tales, that the truth behind whatever the story they tell is a combination to a lock that is within your consciousness and beneath your ability to deal with from the ego consciousness. And so it is you get these stories, and behind each story is energy that impresses into you reminders of the ancient race knowledge of your true heritage.
What was the Atlantean sense of time?
While time is an objective truth, it's also a subjective experience. But time was organized very similar to this, based upon the revolution of the planet regarding its exposure to the sun. And you see, you're operating in the same universe, and the universe is governed by a certain flow of time. Time is not constant, as it appears to be. It is subject to its own cycles. There's a rhythm. You see, everything is music. And there is a constant flowing in and out, breathing rhythm of all matter, all existence on Earth. And in time itself, there is a breathing out and a breathing in, and there is a slowing and there is a speeding. And so it's never constant, but it is always measured as though it was constant.
So for us, when we become whole people, and we choose to leave the body that we're in at the present time, first of all, I want to know how long we could expect to be in these bodies under normal healthy conditions. Is it going to be
the extension of the lifespan?
Yeah, right now for us. And when we come back, do we start? I realize that we'll have the memories of this time, but will we start with a clean slate always as a baby?
You start afresh each time as you have in the past?
Yes, and have to relearn everything, like numbers and speech and everything. All
as children? Yes. Oh, yes. That is the biological choice of this, of the rules of this game. And so always there is that and the need for the period of nurture. You know, while this karma is over, you're still dealing with issues and you're still learning. And you're going in, as we began by saying, into a period of time when your choices reverberate much more loudly than they have in the past. And so there is still, even though you grow, and it is a knowledge of the culture, of the origin of souls, and the knowledge that we are all one, that does not stop you from being human. Because you are a complete and whole human does not mean that you are all alike as peas in a pod. It does not mean that you do not have challenges in your life. It does not mean that you stop growing. You are not reaching a state of perfection. You are reaching a state of wholeness, and there's a difference.
Was there a class distinction or stratification in Atlantean society at all?
At the time we're speaking of, no. Absolutely not.
Okay,
there was, as there will be soon here, a recognition of the vitality and equality of all use of divine energy.
What kind of an economy did they have?
Well, that was another thing that had really been transcended. You see, because they were capable of creating matter from energy and energy from matter through their own resources, there was really not a need. There was I suppose you'd call it a sort of very advanced and subtle system of bartering that was ingrained into the culture, which was like, it was automatic, really. It wasn't even something that worked out because it had been so much and so long apart, that there was a constant flow of trading back and forth, not so much of material things as of services, because there was so little need for material goods. That simply wasn't a desirable thing.
Were you going to tell us how long these bodies will last?
Well, are you talking about this life for you?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, no, certainly not.
I mean, just an overall general.
We will say, as you enter this new time, as you have more dominion over your own bodies, and that you will be able to extend your lifespan within reasonable limits, and reasonable limits are based on the nature of matter and its tendency to decay. So, in order to do your work. But there would be no point in extending your life simply for the sake of extending your life, so that you could play shuffleboard in Florida. It's simply not that. Once you're conscious of the fact that you're never not conscious, you don't worry about things like death and transitions. You lose your attachment to a particular time and place. It doesn't mean you are dispassionate and without love, but it means that you are aware that life is a symphony and not a single note. And that however much you may make this single note as beautiful and as clear as possible, you know that the symphony is so much greater and that you move onward. And there is a flow of spirits, and so you don't become so attached, i.e. dependent upon each other in a particular manifestation. You love each other for who you truly are, not for the mask that you wear. So now we will draw this reading to a close, and we thank you all for your attention and bid you Godspeed as your journey continues.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Plautus.
Plautus.